Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Unlock Insights and Reduce Costs by Modernizing Your Data Warehouse on AWS. My name is Chris Burns. I'm a Partner Solutions Architect here at AWS. And joining me today, I have Francois Zimmerman, Partner Technology Evangelist based in EMEA with Tableau. And I also have Jason Laquismo, Associate Vice President of Strategic Partnerships with Pearson. Francois and Jason have an excellent use case to share with us today. Demos and how-tos are great, but it's much better to have or to hear directly from a partner or from customers on how they're leveraging an AWS service to build a real-world solution. Now, before we get to those use cases and before we get to their story, I apologize for the mic issue there. Now, before we get to Jason and Francois, I want to briefly share with you the full agenda for today's webinar. As soon as the slide advances. There we go. So, like I said, I want to take just a moment and talk about the current state of data warehousing. And then we're going to talk about, based on that, I have highlighted some of the benefits of using AWS for data warehousing, and I want to share a reference architecture with you. And then here's the good news. That's all you're going to have to hear from me. Then we're going to get into to Jason and Francois' conversation, and I'm going to hand the mic to them, and we're going to get into the deep dive into an excellent presentation that they have planned for you today. Following their presentation, of course, I'm going to get the mic back for just a moment. We're going to talk about how you can get started using some of these technologies that you're going to hear about today, and then we're going to have a Q&A session. So we'll try to get through our presentation as quickly as possible, which presents a great opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have directly from the source. All right, so let's get started. Now, before I go any further, what I really love to do on presentations such as this is take a moment to level set. We have a wonderfully broad array of attendees on this call today, on this webinar today, and terms of experience will vary greatly. So if the veterans will pardon me, I wanted to define exactly what a data warehouse is before we go any further. The simplest definition is that a data warehouse creates a central repository of data from multiple data sources, which may be different formats, and provides reporting and data analysis capabilities. So if you want to throw a tomato at me and say that that's wrong, please feel free to drop a question in the chat box and we can discuss that. But I'm really just trying to capture the essence of what a data warehouse is. In the next few slides, I want to paint a picture of the current state of data warehousing and then touch on some of the challenges that you may be facing with your current data warehouse implementation today. Now, I'd love to do a show of hands to see which scenario applies to you. I found it's a great way for the collective audience to see that their problems are shared amongst other people, but obviously it's not going to work in our format today. So if it applies to you, just silently nod and I'll do my best to continue on. So what we're hearing from customers is that they need new tools. They need new methods to keep up with just the pace of data growth and the ever-changing complexity of the data. How do they stop worrying about capacity planning? I mean, for crying out loud, it's 2019. We shouldn't have to worry about capacity planning. And what methods are available to our customers to quickly collect, store, and analyze? Now, in today's climate, I say quickly. Quickly is usually synonymous with that push, that drive to get as close to real time as possible. So if you hear me say quickly, that's really what I mean. Now, some of the challenges of facing users today is exponential data growth. Now, we could talk about this topic all day. The key point to take away from this, and it's a point that I think we can all agree on, is that your data volume will grow. It's not going to shrink. If you think about the opportunities for tagging data, for automated generation of metadata, for sentiment analysis, it's easy to see that data growth is on an upward trajectory, and that trajectory is not going to change anytime soon. We have varying types of data. If we just stick with the primitives, it's very easy to talk about data in terms of binary and ASCII, but that's just not realistic. We should all be cognizant of that. That's a terrible oversimplification. I mean, we have free-form text, you have relational data, you have log files in various formats, there's Parquet, there's JSON. I still see XML hanging around from time to time. This can become a serious challenge if you have a goal of a single source of truth for your data. And then we have the need for faster data analysis. Your data is only as good as the tools you have to interpret it. you could be sitting on a figurative gold mine of data, but if you can't access those insights contained within that data, you may have heard that information is defined in terms of data, knowledge is defined in terms of information. If you can't access the insights contained within that data, you're missing a big piece of the picture. Now, let's take this a step further and say you do have the tools that you need to refine insights from raw data, but it runs a nightly batch job. Sometimes that's not adequate. Maybe it runs periodically or lags by several hours. And this kind of goes back to that push for real time, that quickly that I talked about, because sometimes several hours is even unacceptable, depending on the industry that you're in. I knew I was going to do it at least once. I apologize. I went forward 2 slides. So the benefits of using AWS for data warehousing. Now, Amazon Redshift, it was purpose-built. Well, what I mean by purpose-built is it was built with very specific goals in mind. It wasn't built, and we said, if we build it, they will come. It was built based on real customer requests. It was built on real customer feedback, and it was built to solve for the problems that we're seeing today. So it's fast, but yet it's still easy to use. It's simplistic. Invent and simplify is one of the primary tenets that we use at AWS. It's elastic, use as much or as little as you need. It's secure while maintaining compatibility to your existing BI toolbox. And of course, it's low cost. And when you add the force multiplier of the other AWS services within our portfolio of products and services, it makes for an incredibly compelling story around Redshift. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. It's pretty easy for an AWS SA to sit here and tell you how great Redshift is, but you don't have to take my word for it. So we put this slide in here just for you. Jeff Bezos called you divinely discontent customers, and we have a slide from the Forrester Wave. Forrester, of course, is an analysis firm, and they positioned AWS in the lead, in strong on both axes here for big data warehousing. So what does Redshift look like, at least from an architectural point of view? If we look at this slide from left to right, we see that you have your disparate data sources, IoT sensor data, log data, corporate data center where you may have emails and who knows what type of unstructured data coming in. So Amazon Redshift is going to take that, it's going to collect it all up, and it's as simple as writing to S3. Amazon Redshift has a component called Spectrum that lets you query S3 directly. And so then what Redshift is going to do is going to wrap all that up. It's going to tie up all of these disparate data sources for you. And it's going to give you the ability to analyze and visualize that data, like I said, with the business tools, the business intelligence tools, excuse me, that you are used to using today. And I believe at this point in time, you have survived. You have survived this part of the webinar, and it's my pleasure to introduce Francois Zimmerman of Tableau, and he is going to walk you through the next stage of the webinar today. Thank you very much for your time. I will be back at the end of the webinar. Francois?
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Just a quick introduction. I am the partner technologist for the EMEA region here at Tableau. I look after the CTO level relationship into all of our tech alliances and system integrators and solution provider partners. And obviously, AWS is one of our really key partners because of the fact that they unlock all that processing that our users need in order to be able to do analytics at the speed of thought. But before I get on to the how, in terms of how we actually integrate with the data warehouse, I just want to look at what the users are trying to do with their data. So the reality is you can build a data warehouse, but unless you have business users actually consuming the data, actually using it to become data driven, then you haven't really actually moved the needle forward. So what our customers are trying to do is they're trying to move from companies that make decisions based on gut, companies that make decisions in the absence of data, to data-driven companies. And data-driven companies need to, it's a decision to become a data-driven company. It's not something that just happens. You need to make an organizational change, you need to invest in skills, and you need to invest in the tools that enable people to make those decisions. So we think that there's 5 really key things that people need to do in order to become a data-driven company, and that's what we're laser focused on as a company. The first is they need to focus on giving all of their users great data literacy skills. So that starts off with this basic thing where you need to move from using static reports that are embedded inside PDFs and PowerPoints to make decisions to using dynamic reports where people can ask different questions that are relevant to their own domain. Secondly, it involves moving from making decisions based on spreadsheets, which are kind of non-authoritative, to collaborating with data, and making and starting to use data as part of digital storytelling. So you actually tell stories around the data that you've generated instead of using static presentations. So we think that that's kind of the first thing. The second thing that data-driven companies do is they provide platforms that enable users to consume the data wherever they are. So if they're inside their business apps, they need to be able to consume powerful analytics. If they're on their mobile devices, they need to be able to consume the KPIs and analytics. And there will be some power users that will want to do self-service analytics. But we think that more and more users in the enterprise should feel comfortable with being self-service, with being able to ask novel questions of the data and come up with novel insights. The third key behavior is providing new ways for customers to interact and query their data. So we've introduced natural language processing into our analytic ecosystem. So what that means is people can now use natural language to ask questions and to discover what insights the data sets contain. And we think this is important because there's always been a percentage of users that aren't comfortable with engaging with data using numbers or engaging with data using charts. And this is a good on-ramp. And secondly, it's powerful because it's rather hard when you have lots and lots of different data sources to kind of do this iterative initial discovery where you're saying, well, what information does this data source contain? So we think that that's a great way of discovering what information is available in your company's data assets. The fourth key behavior is governance through empowerment. So we believe that when you give people bad tools, they will tend to take the data outside of the tool set. They will, for example, the first thing they'll do if they have a static BI tool that they can't ask novel questions of is they'll firstly export the data out of that BI tool. They'll start to interrogate it in spreadsheets and they'll send those spreadsheets around an email, and rapidly you'll lose control of the data. Secondly, when you have a central IT arm that creates the reports, if you like, as a report factory, and you don't enable all of the business users and the domain experts to create their own novel insights, then people will leave the platform and you'll lose control of the data. And then finally, we think that the platform itself needs to be the way that you publish, you manage access controls, you manage permissions, and you manage the kind of life cycle of that data as it moves from the backend systems all the way through to user insights. And then the final key behavior of data-driven companies is to build a thriving internal data community. So this starts off inside the tooling. The platform needs to enable people to collaborate while they're interrogating their data. So while they're going through the visualizations and they're going through the analytics, they need to be able to have data conversations. But also, we believe that the power of an internal data community is directly proportional to the power of the external community. And Tableau has the largest analytics community on the planet. We have hundreds of thousands of users collaborating on Tableau Public every day. We have hundreds of thousands of people collaborating on Tableau Community every day. So we believe that building an internal data community is a choice. You have to give people forums within the company where you can give them ways of sharing great insights and sharing great visualizations that they've created and great novel uses for the company's data that they've created. So that's what we're doing in terms of changing the behavior of companies. Now, this is kind of how we do it. There's 4 key innovation pillars that we have when we're designing products to be able to cope with this massive change that the organization needs to go through. The first pillar is analytics for everyone. We need to make sure that we move from 5% of the user base doing analytics, so this very IT-centric way of providing reports that we used to have, to analytics for everyone, which means that 70% plus of the organization needs to be able to ask novel questions to data, reblend the data in novel ways, and that's kind of the core of our business. The second thing is we're seeing companies moving from just providing analytics within, so for example, BI tools, to actually embedding it inside all the applications, as well as embedding it inside, for example, portals that they're providing to their external customers and the external business partners. So this idea of analytics in any app and any process is very important because, again, we need to provide analytics where the business wants to operate. When we talk about this third pillar, which is organization-wide deployments, we're talking about we need to make sure that we can connect to all the data sources that the business has, and also we can provide the right security controls and security integrations in order to be able to overcome those deployment hurdles. And then finally, self-service data management is about the fact that your data isn't always in the right shape for your analytic domain. So sometimes you need to have data prep tools which enable you to remix the data and recut it in ways that make sense for your specific domain of analysis. Okay, so that's the how. We by doing these difficult technical things, we believe we can address these 4 key analytics industry trends. So we know that these trends appear to resonate with our customers. We see the majority of our customers moving from IT-led analytics to business user-led analytics, where they have a much wider community of people using analytics every day. The majority of our customers are moving from on-premise data silos, which just don't scale to the needs of the many. They scale to the needs of the few, to these centralized cloud-based data environments, which can enable them to mix any data from any application within their organization and unlock new insights. We see people moving from restricted data access, where like a small team of people were able to generate new insights, to governed data management, where we put effective controls around it and we effectively enable devolution of that to all of the lines of business. And then finally, we see this need to move away from legacy systems to this rich ecosystem of modern cloud-based tools. And that's where we partner extensively with AWS. Now, in terms of what a joint Tableau and AWS solution unlocks, these are kind of the 4 key things, the 4 key pain points that we believe we address. Firstly, we enable people to efficiently use all available data rather than a subset of data. And typically what you saw historically was some BI tools tied to some subsets of data, and it was very difficult to do cross-domain analytics and cross-domain insights. Secondly, we saw that when people were trying to combine self-service analytics and at the same time meet the requirements of IT in terms of governance, we saw that as a significant pain point, and we spent a lot of time integrating with their platform to make sure that we can solve that issue. Once you've solved those first 2 pain points, so you're using all available data and you putting analytics in the hands of the many, then you end up with this scale problem. You end up with the fact that your on-premise data environments just weren't built for everyone to use analytics on a day-to-day basis. So you need to provide a platform that scales to the needs of everyone. And then finally, we are working extensively with AWS. They provide some amazing migration capabilities for people to migrate from on-premise environment to Redshift. And at the same time, Tableau provides a consistent analytic experience, whether they're connected to those legacy environments or whether they're connected to the cloud environment. So the business users, we can change the platforms underneath, and the business users can get the same analytic experience. So we believe that that solves the kind of skills hurdle. So I just quickly want to finish up with a couple of slides about the tech partnership. We have extensive integrations with AWS to provide, for example, QuickStart, so that you can deploy to Tableau server with ease. We can integrate with all of their data sources. And this is what a typical blueprint would look like. Our job in the AWS data services ecosystem is to provide this abstraction layer so that you can use data from any of the AWS data sources without the business user being aware of the complexity and the underlying differences between them. So you can have, for example, hot data inside an in-memory columnar data store that we provide. You can blend that with data inside Redshift. You can blend that with cold data that sits inside Athena. And these days, you can actually also start to use our dashboard integrations with SageMaker, so that you can start to do machine learning training. So that's a new integration that's in beta. Okay, so our job in this ecosystem is to put analytics in the hands of the many by abstracting away the complexities of all these different data source types, allowing IT to use the data source type that's most appropriate for the specific data problem that they're trying to address, while allowing the business users a consistent experience. Okay, so that's the end of that. I'm going to pass over to Jason and ask him to tell the story of what happened at Pearson.
Great, thanks, Francois. It's great to be here, everyone. I look forward to kind of giving you my rendition of what these 2 gentlemen just spoke about. What I'll say really quickly, just in terms of what I do here at Pearson, is my role is really, I'm responsible for Pearson's North America Big Data and Analytics Business Development. So before I get started, I would like to give a little bit of an orientation to who Pearson is, for those of you who may not know where Pearson began. Actually, in 1844, we started as a construction company by Samuel Pearson and his sons. And by the late to early 1900s, We had actually built some of the largest tunnels in London, in New York City. We had actually built out the Admiralty Harbor in Dover, the Halifax in Canada. We even built out the Mexico Canal, which drained Mexico City, and a number of other large projects around the world from a construction standpoint. In the 1920s, Pearson moved really into publishing, where we acquired portions of various companies, Random House, as well as The Economist. We also purchased in outright the Financial Times, and from the 20s up until the 90s, we had actually acquired a number of other types of products. But really, and I raise all this because Pearson was really a holding company, acquiring different sources of revenue and such. In the 90s, though, we actually moved from we started learning more towards education. We purchased Prentice Hall and a variety of other higher education textbook companies, really, and then we merged that with Addison Wesley here at Pearson to form Pearson Education. But along the way, we even went to the point where we actually owned we owned the show and the rights to Baywatch. And so as we began the early thousands, Pearson really began to focus its attention on specifically learning. We began selling off many of the various aspects of Pearson that were not oriented or aligned to education. And so here we go. So our real mission was to become the world's learning company. And what did that mean? It meant we again wanted to transition from these various aspects of the world where we were really a holding company to really focusing on how we can empower learners. And to do that, though, there was a goal. The goal in mind was we believe that learning opens up a vast number of opportunities, and that we could help by creating fulfilling careers and ultimately better lives. And so we had a real impetus to focus on change. So one of those changes has really been moving from a print experience to a more immersive experience using digital. And what that means now is we've got various technologies that we're using, whether they be adaptive, whether they leverage machine learning or artificial intelligence and things like that behind the scenes. It's really to actually help learners learn, so that they can go into their future careers capable and ready. And so as we think about what we're trying to do here at Pearson, it's really about how do we take this new way of learning over in the last century and really bring that to life. Well, what comes from that is all the data, right? So what you're able to really achieve from a data standpoint previously from textbooks is you could look at how many units were sold. You didn't really have much better insight in terms of quantitatively how those things were being used and what it was being used. And so with the onset of digital, it really enabled us to see things that we had never been able to see before. So where Pearson was, though, and this goes into our next kind of aspect of what our charter was we really wanted to create a landscape, specifically an analytics landscape that enabled our various customers to make evidence-based decisions. And so to do that, this is where we ended up running into some challenges, and we'll start to talk about that here in a moment. But we needed to transform from that print-based learning experience to that digital immersive. And the challenge was because like I had said earlier, we'd been primarily a holding company. You can imagine that behind the scenes we had a large number of backends and various backends. From a data standpoint and from an analytics standpoint, we were very dispersed and disparate, and it really created this was now the impetus for our project, or what I'll call our project objectives or business objectives, which was we needed to be able to better serve a more sophisticated consumer while providing the business with better data faster, right? So I liked what Francois had said earlier. How do we enable the analysis at the speed of thought? And that is one of the biggest challenges that we have faced. I think we as a community face is how do we enable people to ask that next question from the data and not be limited to, let me get back to you on that. How can I get back to you on that? The other objective that we had is we needed to move from a very complex operating environment and reduce that cycle time, so that from when somebody made a request, whether of the data or of an analysis, that we could bring that to a level of insight or really narrative more effectively and efficiently. We also needed to be able to better support our various teams that were looking at the data. So whether that be a data scientist or our analysts or even really business users, we need to give them the ability to traverse the data based on their specific needs. And then finally, we needed to be able to create a curated source of truth that were both efficient and effective. And so I joined Pearson I joined Pearson in 2014, and my objective was to really assess early on what did our landscape look like, and what could we do, and what we would end up finding was that we were and I don't know, for some of you this may seem very common or very similar, I should say, and for some it may not. You know, we have a lot of legacy here. There's a lot of challenges that we were facing specifically around various environments. We had a traditional on-site Oracle data warehouse that all it had access to was sales and registration data. And so the team that I was responsible for around analytics was both product analytics and analytics as a whole that would face our consumers. And so I needed to be able to have access to the event information that was coming from our various platforms. What I didn't mention is that we, at the time, somewhere between, it was depending on the semester, between 12 to 14 million learners on the platforms, and there's a wealth of activities. They're using Pearson for both reading and those activities, but also really homework and review. So there's a plethora of events that are happening that really locked away in these mirrors. And the team that I had that was geared towards supporting our various business stakeholders, our editorial teams, and our product managers, we had access to just sales and registration data. So because of that, we were, you know, we could give you enough information, but it wasn't very useful and it wasn't very helpful. The other challenge that we face is our next generation products that were being built out in AWS. We had no way to access, from an analytics standpoint, S3. And so we were really stuck in a variety of ways. And so in 2015, so 2014 was really a year of assessment and understanding what the lay of the land really was. Where were some of the skeletons? Where were some of the challenges? And also, who did we have to work with at Pearson to try to make these changes? Pearson's a rather large organization. It's got a lot of complexity, a lot of very smart people. But you know, just because we're smart doesn't mean we're all going down the same path, and we have different objectives. And so 2014 was really about making that assessment. And then 2015, you know, really listening to those various teams, gathering the respective requirements, and ultimately partnering with AWS to help understand how we should approach this particular challenge. What I'll say is that the challenge that we were facing is not something that was inconsequential, and we needed to be able to make progress as quickly as possible. The other thing that we started in 2015 is we really started the process of showing people the power of data. And we bought 30 seats of Tableau server, and we used that as effectively as we possibly could to start to promote what were the various narratives that were coming out of the information that was really locked away. And so as we got into the first half of 2016, we were able to actually access our information in this new environment while we worked to bring together the various legacy platforms into S3. So while that work was underway, we began still really being able to look at some of the information from those legacy environments directly. We were able to look at other data, whether it be Google Analytics or iPads, census information that was relevant for us. But we were also able to look at the information coming from our next generation products. However, we were using something called Qubole at the time, and it just wasn't performant. And so we needed to move to, at the time, we actually used an Oracle instance, and we saw improvement in our querying. The one thing I'll say though is that this particular product didn't have a huge amount of users at this point, and the volume of data was manageable at the first half of 16 in that Oracle instance. But what we ended up finding was that by the second half of the year, we had hit all of the limits, and the performance of the Oracle instance was just ineffective. And Chris had mentioned earlier about how as they were building Redshift, they built it purpose-built. And I believe that and know that Pearson was involved as being one of those partners early to really not just kick the tires, but to give requirements and feedback on how Redshift could be improved and how it could be better, and what was working and what wasn't working, because these were in a lot of ways the early days of this type of always on solution. But we moved to Redshift, and we saw an incredible performance change for us. We were now able to bring to life things that were once locked away. And what that means from a query standpoint, when you would run a query and it would take 2 or 3 hours, and now you can transform that to seconds, the ability to then ask the question, which is AKA another query of the data, you can now ask that in seconds. And so you really are beginning that journey of being able to unlock the narrative and understand what the story is at the speed of thought. The other thing that we were now able to do is we were bringing in all the legacy platform data at the end of 16. And I shouldn't say all of it. We had made plans, we had really put together the pipes and really putting things in place to bring over that data into that environment, and had made substantial growth. The other big piece for us was in the second half of 16, in October, we launched Tableau server. So we had been successful enough for the organization to see what the value of being able to see the narrative, and that value, as we launched it to about 450 internal users. Initially, we started at that 30 number. We grew quickly to about 150, and then within about 3 weeks, we had grown to about 450 folks who were really looking to be able to self-serve. And that was one of the things that Francois had mentioned in terms of, what are some of the objectives and what are those kind of critical business behaviors that they're really trying to empower. One of which was they wanted to provide new ways to interact and query. And I feel like that is what we were given the opportunity. And as an outcome of that, really being able to build out a thriving internal data community. Again, that was one of the principles that Francois mentioned. This was really the beginning of that for us here at Pearson. And what was also interesting for us is, we had a lot of folks here that were very used to tables and being able to look at rows of information. And now we were able to show them 1 million plots, 1 million data points in a particular view that could give them an entire book, right? An entire narrative at a glance, versus the human brain being able to capture a billion data points. It's impossible when you look at it from a row standpoint. You can consume 10 to 15 maybe with 4 or 5 columns. You're really able to take and harness that information in new ways. And so we really started, when we deployed Survey, we really did so as a kind of discovery and ad hoc analysis tool. As we moved into 2017, one of the things that we realized was that we needed to also change out our underpinnings and our pipes. And so we moved from Kafka to Amazon's Kinesis. And we also added a new technology at the time, which was Amazon Athena. And for us, that actually became a phenomenal, and I would say I would strongly recommend looking at Amazon Athena as a lookalike to Google Cloud's BigQuery. We started using Athena, kicking the tires and working with that, because it allowed us to turn off and turn on when we needed to, which really supported our ad hoc and discovery. And then we moved all of the various operational insights and monitoring type of dashboards and things to Redshift, and really started to find the blend between these different environments in a way that would really support our specific use cases and our specific stakeholders. What is it that they were trying to do, and how could we do that in a cost-effective way? We also started to, the other thing I'll say is we say deploy, but what I really mean is we grew our adoptions as we started moving forward, and people started seeing the power of what was possible. With good visualization comes great insight, or the potential to discern things that were yet unseen before. And so we had now grown across Pearson to around 1,900 internal users. Again, really being able to leverage this information and look at what was possible in ways that they hadn't before. And for me, that was one of the most exciting things to be a part of, which was watching something come to life, right? Really watching this kind of antiquated approach. We had been using Pentaho as a way of bringing the insights to bear, and it was just these very, what I would call antiquated visualizations and antiquated, ways of showing people what they needed to do next. Being able to make an evidence-based decision meant you had to have the evidence, and you have to be able to discern the evidence. And that's where we were able to really harness the art of data visualization. And I think because of that, being able to see others adopt that and then take it on themselves and begin to develop and look at their problems in new ways, asking of the data new ways. And so really 2017 was really about harnessing what was there and expanding what we needed to expand. As we move into 2018 and really to present, we've now successfully grown our internal adoption of Tableau in a variety of ways. We've grown it through a much broader community of publishers. So we have over 75 various groups that publish into Tableau server so for their specific business challenges. So it can range from tech ops, it could be folks in content, it might be folks in finance, it could be business operations. Our sales force is using Tableau in a new way. And so that type of growth, really seeing the power of what was possible and watching all of these folks really take their questions, their challenges, and being able to go at them in new ways is what was exciting for me to see happen. And really, it took on its own life. In the community, going back to that kind of fifth area that Francois was talking about, this was the year that we really started to see that community thrive. The other thing is that another way of representing that is we've now grown to around 6,700 internal users. And then in addition to that, we've started to extend the power of data visualization through the Tableau platform to external customers, so institutional customers here in North America, and being able to show them and extend to them various insights across our products, but through the lens of data visualization. How are their learners learning? How are their learners challenged? What is it that could be better? What can we bring to the equation? The other thing that has been powerful for us from the AWS space is we continue to grow in data. We have a wealth of products, and we need to be able to ingest that to the best of our ability and make that available. And so in 2018, we launched a product called Learning Analytic Data Streams to our external or institutional customer. We short named it LADS. And the goal is really to extend off of this environment via API an ability for our customers to access their information in a raw state in a way that allows them to manage that more effectively. And to me, that is we were able to do something internally to help ourselves be more effective at where are our learners struggling in the content? Where do we need to make improvements? Where across the actual digital experience and learning experience do we need to help and remove roadblocks? And then ultimately, all of that information can be reused by faculty, instructors, deans and chairs, by students themselves, as well as by the administration. So being able to extend that for us has been really some of the most exciting parts of my job. And so what that now looks like from a data visualization standpoint, and the reason I'm harping on this is because data visualization is only as good as its data. And in this space, you can't lie with data. It is what it is. And so you either have it or you don't. It's either understandable or it's not. And for us, what we have had to do through that whole process is go back and wherever we can upstream, make adjustments either in the code or with our various teams so that they could push the respective changes down. That's really challenging. I don't know how many of you have had to do that, but that's one of the areas where I think we as a community are challenged by getting things changed at the point of origin based on various contexts. And so this is where we start to use tools like whether some of the tools in AWS or whether it be in Tableau, to be able to take some of the changes we need to make and apply them to the source as the analyst or as the business consumer and user. And so now that we have an environment that allows us to actually traverse the various information, we now have a means of bringing it to life. And I say bring to life because it really requires interpretation. So in the space that I'm in specifically, I help institutions evaluate their various the various data that's coming from either what's called a MyLab, which is a kind of homework and review, an assessment digital product, or a mastering product. And so they have students that are in these things, and they're working hard to make improvements. And but in this case, in so many cases, they've sent off their students into the Pearson experience, and they don't have visibility into what's actually happening. And so being able to bring that to life and help bring interpretation, where what we're able to see now is specifically where there is struggle, where students are being successful for that course. So not, and where in real time do we see an opportunity to intervene in the first few weeks based on activity and behavior that's coming off of those platforms and products, and being able to bring that to life is really through data visualization. And so for us, I think this is the opportunity that we have as a community is you first have to have an ability to traverse the data, and then you have to have the ability to look at that information in creative and new ways, and then be able to disseminate that to those who make decisions, so that they're able to make those evidence-based decisions. So from the last part, what I'll call the kind of key takeaways is, dream big, have audacious goals. So when we started our project in 2014, mind you, I did think we would go a little bit faster. We had a big goal, which was we wanted to take all of these disparate data sources, and we wanted to take third-party data that were coming off of things like Google Analytics and others. We wanted to bring it into a place and make it readily and easily available. Another way I describe it is we wanted to enable our business users to put almost any scaffolding, any business question scaffolding, whether it be content or sales or product development. We wanted them to be able to ask the data the questions that were pertinent to them, and we wanted that data to stay in a state that allowed for any context. And so at the time, that didn't really seem possible or plausible, but that was our kind of North Star. And in working with Amazon, we were able to bring that to life, and not just Amazon, but really internally at Pearson, we have a great number of brilliant minds that helped us in this process of architecting what would it look like, what are we trying to achieve, what's feasible. The other takeaway is partnering. So leveraging industry expertise. Pearson is not a data warehousing company. We are not a cloud-based company that is focused on enabling all these other folks with the ability to do data warehousing. That's not our wheelhouse. And so we needed partners that could help us bring that to life and understood things that we didn't, help us to manage the costs, knowing that we had a growing volume and we needed to be able to be thoughtful about that. But also on the data visualization side, we partner with Tableau to help us. How do we bring this to life for various customers? What does it mean to bring adoption into a place where we grow from just 30 people to a culture that is looking at information in new ways? And Tableau has done a great job in enabling us as an organization to do that by having various on-site trainings, providing monthly trainings. Tableau has done a lot to really enable us, as has AWS. And so the last part that I would say is really fostering culture that's willing to fail fast towards improvement. And I say that because one of the challenges that I think or the trap maybe we can fall into is, we want to get it right, and it's understandable we want to get it right. We wanted to get it right, but the facts is you're likely not going to get it right from the beginning. And we want to learn from those mistakes, and none of this are things that you probably haven't heard. But from a practical standpoint, changing a culture and changing the human behavior is very difficult, and creating an environment and fostering a culture that says it's okay to make mistakes. Let's learn from that mistake. And so one practical way that looks is what you see from 2014 to now is you see a number of mistakes or a number of changes that we were making to try to find the right set of solutions, whether we moved from Qubole to Oracle and we moved to other things. What we learned early was we couldn't figure out the right technology, so we better modularize. And man, has that paid off for us. Being modularizing us has allowed us to plug and play various capabilities along the way without being tied to very extensive and expensive solutions. And so let me thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions, and I'll pass it on.
Okay, great. Jason, thank you for that wonderful, wonderful story. I love the diagrams, and I loved how you brought all the elements together. When I say elements, I mean all the individual components of disparate data sources. And thank you for that background story around Pearson. I imagine if any company is going to have disparate data, then that story right there is going to be a great representation of a company with disparate data. So now, how do you get started after hearing what you've heard here today? How do you jump into to Amazon Redshift? How do you jump into using Tableau? And I'm going to try to outline that for us very briefly here. Again, once the slides catch up with my 1,000-mile-an-hour speech. I'm trying to will the slide to advance right now, folks. Because I know if I keep clicking, we're going to, there we go. All right. So let's talk about accelerate your migrations from legacy systems to Amazon. We have a tool that we've created just for this scenario. We call it the Database Migration Service. Now, the Database Migration Service is designed to migrate your legacy databases to AWS quickly and securely. The source database remains completely operational during migration. And I'm sorry, the database remains completely operational during migration, so to minimize any downtime that you're going to experience. Most widely used commercial and open source databases are supported by DMS today. And we also support what we call homogeneous and heterogeneous migrations. So what that means is a homogeneous would be an Oracle to Oracle. Heterogeneous might be an Oracle or MS SQL to Aurora. And also DMS, Database Migration Service, is free for 6 months when you migrate to Aurora, Redshift, DynamoDB, or DocumentDB. And given that most migrations that I've seen wrap up within 6 months, I think you can do the math there and see how that works out for you. And once again, I'm waiting for this slide to advance. I apologize. Okay, so back to the getting started. We're going to distribute this webinar afterwards via email link. But AWS has prepared a number of documents, a number of QuickStart guides, everything that you're going to need to dip a toe in the water, so to speak, or to get some exposure to these products and services. And also, we have an amazing support staff. So if you have questions, you can email anybody at AWS, and they're gonna help you out as best as they can. And now, what I'm going to do is hand the mic once more to Francois, and he's going to talk briefly about the QuickStart guide available for Tableau.
Hi everyone. So in order to kind of help you on your Tableau journey on top of AWS, we've created a couple of resources. The first two here are the technical resources. So how do you deploy a Tableau server cluster on AWS? There's some CloudFormation templates, and there's some instructions here about how to do that in a secure way. We also have this end-to-end reference architecture modern data warehouse on AWS, which goes through a number of AWS data technologies and how you consume those within Tableau. And then finally, we have we have kind of a solution page here, which I highly invite you guys to check out, which contains a number of resources, including this one here, which is how you tune Redshift and Tableau for best performance. So that's really how do I get this kind of responsive analytics at the speed of thought kind of experience while using those two products together. Okay, so Chris, back over to you.
Thank you, Francois. And I believe we are at the Q&A portion of the webinar. So I will officially advance this slide to the Q&A slide, and then we're going to dig in to these questions. And now the first one we have here is the question asks, what are the anti-patterns where I can't use AWS Redshift but Tableau plus Tableau? So how to answer this question? Well, first off, I don't want to use the word anti-pattern. It has a lot of connotations that I don't want to associate with this answer, but I understand the spirit of the question. And I've given this some thought, and the only scenario I can envision where AWS and Tableau would not be your first choice would be if you're working with a form of data that does not lend itself well to visualization in tabular format. And what I mean there is if you're working with 3D images, or if you're working with 3D point clouds, or maybe image collections altogether, Tableau is a best in breed product for data that can be presented in tabular form. So Tableau is a great choice if your data can fit into tabular form. If not, then you may need to look at some other alternatives there.
So yeah, I mean, I would have said that it's not really just tabular form. So if you have, for example, spatial data or that sort of stuff, then that's a pretty good fit too. I was actually going to say that because Tableau can connect to like all the data services that you can run inside AWS. So for example, you may find that, for example, PostgreSQL is a better fit for spatial data, for example, because you can then do things like spatial joins, and you can leverage those capabilities. So, for example, you may want to use AWS Aurora for some of those data types, and then what you would then do is use Tableau as a layer over the top of Aurora and Redshift to blend your spatial data together with your traditional big data. So I think that's the thing really to consider is because you have an analytic layer which is able to blend multiple different data sources together, you kind of have this freedom where you can use the right data technology for the size and shape of the data. So for example, Redshift for medium to hot data, and then for example, Athena for cold data, and then you can kind of blend those together inside your analytic tool frame.
All right, Francois, thank you very much for adding color there to my limited answer. So next question we have here, I believe, Francois, this will be posed to you as well. There's a statement about specific Tableau connectors for Redshift, Aurora, Athena, and the question is, are those connectors any better than standard JDBC connections?
Yeah, so what we can connect to all of those data sources using JDBC. What we tend to do is we create a connector where we can see, for example, a specific optimization. So, for example, we can talk, plain old ANSI standard SQL to all of those tools, but where we can see a benefit in, for example, Tableau having awareness of the way a certain data source is structured. We have this layer that we call VisQL, which sits between the kind of user visualizations, and it actually translates their interactions into SQL, which is transmitted to the underlying source. So we will build a connector where we can, for example, add value by optimizing the SQL that we transmit, or, for example, where there's something like a security integration that we need to implement, which is slightly non-standard. So in an ideal world, actually there wouldn't be any benefit. Then we wouldn't have to develop any connectors. We just use JDBC for everything. But we, develop connectors where we can see that additional integration adds value.
Great, thank you, Francois. So a couple more questions here. We have time for some more. From an AWS perspective, is there any preference of using Tableau as BI reporting tool on top of Redshift, comparing to other BI tools? Are there any specific performance optimizations on AWS that benefits Tableau specifically? So great question. I'll answer that this way. Amazon Redshift, it was built to be fast, fully managed, and allow you to bring your existing BI tools. So the choice of your BI tools will then come down to the best in breed of BI tools, what your knowledge workers are accustomed to, and what analysis goals you have as an organization. As I would say that the higher quality the product, the more performant it will be on AWS. And given that Tableau, they're an advanced tier partner, Tableau has the data and analytics competency. We have what we call APN competency partners. And these are partners that are not just part of our APN, our AWS partner network, but they've demonstrated via use cases and via a vetting, a very detailed technical vetting, that they are competent in this particular area, and Tableau holds that data analytics competency. So I don't see why you would not go with Tableau on AWS as your first choice for your visualization needs. Francois?
Yeah, I'm gonna make a statement here, which is that when you select a BI tool to sit on top of a cloud data platform, you should be selecting a tool that leverages the processing capability of the cloud data platform. So what you'll see is a lot of BI tools out there require you to extract the data into their kind of in-memory store. Click, for example, is extract only for most use cases. Power BI for the Redshift connector is extract only for most use cases. To the extent that some of them will require you to extract the data into, for example, an external OLAP engine like analytics services. So that clearly is not protecting the investment you've made in a massively scalable cloud database. Whereas what we can do is, with Tableau, we can connect live to Redshift. That works extremely well. But where we see, for example, the need for a specific KPI dashboard, which people hit, thousands of times a second, then we can take an extract of that to optimize that into an in-memory data store that we call Hyper. So we think this ability to combine both modes of operation actually gives us an edge, and it means that we can deal with much larger data sets and actually leverage the power of Redshift better.
Great, thank you. Looks like we got time for just a couple more. And here's another one that says, let's assume I have a Redshift cluster and EC2 instance with Tableau in the same region. Are there any hardware network optimizations that gives me better performance than if I would set up a similar stack on-prem connected with 10 gig fiber? And the answer is yes. We have instances. We have the M5 instances. We have the R5 instances with 20 gig network capacity. So really it's going to come down again to a question of what are you trying to achieve with Tableau? Tableau is a visualization tool. So you're going to want to take a great look at how many users, what kind of data are you visualizing, what form are they visualizing, and then say, is the network the bottleneck? It doesn't sound to me like the network would be the bottleneck here. This is a human-centered product. So I think it's going to come down to how much data can you feed to your users at once. But there are scenarios where you would want to use EC2 instances. There are scenarios where you may want to have your data just reside in S3. So we have enough features and services to make a customized solution for nearly any scenario that you might have. Francois, do you want to add any color to
that? No, I mean, I agree. I mean, to be honest, sometimes it's hard to measure the difference because you have, inside these BI tools, you typically have an ability to cache data, and so you may not see the performance difference on every single query that you issue. I don't think it's going to be cheaper to run it on premise and use a cloud data source. So my preference would be, run the cluster in the cloud, because then you can scale the BI cluster in an elastic way, in the same way as you can your database cluster.
Excellent, thank you. And just because I don't want him to be left out in the cold, we're gonna throw Jason a question, and if I can find it, it's going to be the last question of the day. Unfortunately, I do apologize while I scroll through my notes here. So the question is, how does Pearson deal with data governance in AWS to keep track of what data jobs are flowing, what data is where, and what jobs do what? So I guess it's a question about, if you could just touch on the data governance aspect of your solution.
Yeah, so the main challenge, great question. Data governance is a really important one, and one that is a substantial challenge in a lot of ways. And the way that we've managed, there's two aspects of the data management, right? There's AWS and then there's Tableau piece. And so for the sake of the audience here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on how we manage data governance through Tableau. And essentially what we've done is, well, actually really quickly, the way that we've set it up is through the AWS and where the data lives, we've created the various structures and things that are necessary to enable folks to have access to specific data via Tableau server. So that way, when you're running extracts, you're running live, you're able to connect to those specific data sources and those specific elements. The Then in terms of managing end users, that's where we manage that in Tableau, enabling folks. We have a single sign-on process, so they're able to use their sign-on for the organization. And then what we do is we set up various groups and roles that allow us to then go in by group and provide the specific access necessary across a pretty healthy number of dashboards or workbooks or visualizations, vizzes, or views is another way of describing it. And so what that has allowed us to do is, though somebody with an admin would have access to over 2,500 different dashboards, those particular people who need access, like a sales organization, may have access to 5. And then what they can do, it may actually be at in some cases, we've set it up to where each dashboard or a dashboard can give access specifically to just what that person needs to see. So if, let's say, Jason Lockisman only has access to these particular things, or should only have access, I can go in and I look at just my information versus being able to look at everybody else's information at the same time, though all that data still lives in that environment. So when Francois joins or logs in, he's able to access his view of that same dashboard without seeing mine and having conflict. I hope that answers the question well enough.
I believe it does. And I also, I see we are at the top of the hour, so this is our time. I want to give a sincere thank you to everybody who has stayed on, who has taken time out of their busy day to join us and listen in today. And once again, those who attended will receive an email with a link to this webinar. And as usual, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out and we will do our best to get those answered. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Bye all.